Welcome to 50 Scales of Gray. I'm attorney Michael Bender, co-founder of the Gray Legal Group, your family law attorney, where we help business owners and professionals survive divorce with their money in their pockets and their kids by their sides. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to dive into the exciting world of the California family law issues. Now, of course, the views I and my guests express during the show are ours only and are only given for informational purposes and not legal advice. If you have a family law case, I highly advise you talk with an attorney If you have a family law case, I highly advise you talk with an attorney one-to-one about your individual legal situation. Now, what is 50 Scales of Gray? This is our attempt at taking the mystery out of a family law case here in California. What is family law? Well, that's your divorces, custody, support cases, the heavy stuff like restraining orders. We may touch on some other topics, but our focus is on family law because, well, that's what I do. If you have any questions you'd like to pose, topics you'd like us to discuss, check out 50scalesofgray.com. That's gray with an E. Send us a message there. Each week, we're going to be welcoming a special guest to discuss the topic of the week. This week, we're going over the ever-contentious issue of child custody and visitation with the court. I'm going to be joined in a little bit by Traci Williams of A Loving Way to Parent, your number one resource for the parent-child relationship. We're going to dive into the effects that a divorce or contentious custody battles have on our children. I'm really looking forward to having her join me shortly. So let's dive into custody and visitation. What does that mean? Well, first, I want to talk about what do you do if you don't have a court order yet? Say you're a divorcing family, you've separated, or parents of a child or children no longer living together. Best advice that I give our clients: don't be stupid. Don't try and keep the child from the other parent. Don't dictate a schedule because you think you're the better parent. Yeah, this goes both ways, mothers and fathers. Talk to each other to try and figure out a schedule that allows both parents an opportunity to have a meaningful relationship, meaningful time with their kids. Maintaining status quo or a schedule as close maintaining status quo or a schedule as close as possible to what schedule you had while the two of you were together is really what the court is going to strive to do. Work with the other parent. Now, keep in mind that once you file a custody case, everything you do is under a microscope. The past actions and anything that you do now is going to be used by the court to make custody orders. Once you get custody orders, make sure you follow them. No matter whether you like them or not, that's what the court's decided. That is the schedule you have with your children. I understand there's some highly contentious custody cases. We're going to go a lot more into that later. There's some cases that involve domestic violence that are going to be, you don't want to maintain that status quo there, definitely. Or other types of visitation, such as step parents or grandparents. We're going to save that for another day. Moral of the story here: don't be stupid. Work with the other parent and try and make this the least contentious time as possible, because as you're going to hear when we get Traci on, it really affects the kids. So that's my primer on custody. When we come back, we're going to dive into how a divorce or contentious custody case affects kids and the family with Traci Williams of A Loving Way to Parent. You don't want to miss this. Welcome back to 50 Scales of Gray. I'm attorney Michael Bender, co-founder of the Gray Legal Group, and we're discussing child custody and visitation on today's show. I am excited to be joined by Traci Williams of A Loving Way to Parent, your number one resource for the parent-child relationship. Traci, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks so much for having me.
Very excited. Hey, Traci, before we dive into child custody and visitation issues, give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you do and what is A Loving Way to Parent.
Awesome. Yes, I'd be happy to. So I'm a parenting coach, and my job is to identify why something's not working in the family. And then I help the family go in and improve that area. We teach families how to work as a team, whether they're in one household or two. Parents will call me for things like behavior issues, co-parenting challenges, sibling rivalry, school issues, attitude, anxiety, anything that's causing conflict or concern. My work involves parents, grandparents, caregivers, and also children of all ages. I work with everybody. And at A Loving Way to Parent, if you think about it, our main focus is teaching communication skills and building the parent-child relationship, because home needs to be a stable and safe place for kids.
Now, you mentioned building that parent-child relationship, and sometimes dealing, in this case, we're talking about divorce or two homes, custody cases. Do you find that there's a lot of conflict that the children feel, and they need a lot of support to get through that time?
They do, because there's a mixture in how the kids are feeling. Some of them are relieved that the parents are not together anymore, in some ways because of the fighting. Other kids don't want it at all, and they're devastated. But
when you say they don't want it at all, they don't want the family to be
they don't want the separation. They don't want to go back and forth. They may have friends that they've talked to that are already going through that. Some kids do better with it than others. It depends on the circumstances in the home. Some kids don't even know it's happening. Like, most kids are pretty much aware that there's stuff not working, but some kids are not aware. If the parents have, maybe they don't ever fight, but they're very quiet about the things that are not working.
They're aware of the tension that goes on in the house.
They're aware of the tension, or they're just, all of a sudden I've had some families where the parents don't fight, and the kids thought everything was fine, and then all of a sudden the parents are saying, hey, we're splitting up, and the kids are very surprised. So it can go either way, but most kids don't want it, but they do like the break from the fighting.
Now, you got the two examples here, the fighting or even the non-fighting, and the parents think that they're hiding it, but there's that tension in the house. What have you seen with kids ages, the younger ages, the teenagers? How is that affecting them emotionally, socially, with their school? How is this overall split really having an effect on their lives?
Well, the first thing that grabbed my attention when you were talking is school. So if you think of all of the requirements on a student in their class, and the teachers are trying to get them to focus, pay attention, everybody wants them to get good grades, but they feel like their home is falling apart, it's very hard to concentrate when emotionally you're not getting your needs met. A lot of times parents are fighting and they're not able to be there for their kids. Or, so one thing that I hear from kids a lot is the kids don't want to ask the parents for anything. They don't want to let the parents know that they're suffering or that they're concerned or they're hurting. They'll cry at night by themselves in bed. They don't let the parents know because they don't want to put more on the parents. So here these kids are going to school trying to function, and the school may or may not know what's going on. Everybody wants the kids to do well, but we're kind of pretending that they're not going through some massive adjustment at home.
Do the parents realize what they're doing? When you're talking with the kid, when you're talking with the children, you turn to the parents, and you might know they're going through a divorce or contemplating separation. Do the parents realize what they're doing, what effect their behavior is having on the kids?
I'd have to say most of the time I don't think so. It's when they come to me because things are not working for the kids, or they realize they're not on the same page, so they need some co-parenting support. That's when they will realize what they're doing is having an adverse effect, because the kids aren't always saying what's going on for them. And the parents a lot of times are really stuck in that conversation with the other parent, and they're not really thinking about what's going on with the kids. They think, and they're trying to separate their kids from it, but they don't really know how to do that, so it's not successful.
Fortunately, you can edit some stuff. So, when you see this conflict in the house, or the parents don't understand that their actions are having what they're having on the kids, what advice do you give to the parents to take a step back and to consider what's going on with their kids?
Well, a couple of things is to really look at whatever they're doing in their relationship with the other parent, they're teaching their kids to do that very thing. We can't control another person. So when you have two parents that are on different pages, one parent wants to have the other parent do something different, the other one wants the other parent to do something different, and they're always focused on the other parent. If they would just focus on themselves and doing what what they would want done to them. I always tell parents, really look at kindness. Even if you're upset about something, it doesn't mean you have to be mean. It doesn't mean you need to be vindictive. You can't control that other parent. You can only control your part. And you're going to take that piece that you have control over, and that's what you're going to use to teach your kids.
I want to kind of jump on some words here. Being a lawyer, you had said, focus on yourself. Now, we can take that in any number of meanings, and a lot of the time, particularly in the divorcing world, when you hear somebody's focus on themselves, it's really the inner me. I want to get what I want. I'm going to stand my ground because it's all about me. How do you separate that from, if you're saying, let's focus on yourself, where does that focus need to be for them to actually take that focus and ultimately do something good for their children, and not put them or keep them in the middle of the fight?
That's a great distinction. A very good question. So it's really looking at, how am I showing up? You're not looking at what am I getting, it's what am I giving. You're not looking at, am I getting my fair share? You're looking at, are my kids getting what they need? It's a different perspective. It's a shift on how you look at the outcome of the conversation or the disagreement, those types of things. And you're looking at, how am I teaching my kids to work with someone in a very hard situation? Am I teaching them to be mean? Am I teaching them to yell? Am I teaching them to be stressed out and take it out on other people, which sometimes parents will do that with their kids? Or am I teaching them to take some time, like to excuse themselves? If you're upset, I tell parents, if you're upset about a conversation, you need to respond to the other parent and say, hey, I need a few minutes, or I need an hour, or let me sleep on this and I'll get back to you. And then the responsible thing to do is to deal with my own anger and then come back with a neutral idea.
That's great. You mentioned before the effect, what we are teaching, or what somebody going through a divorce or in this custody battle is teaching their kids how to act and so forth. Do you see long-term effects as far as what these kids are learning, how it affects them as they grow into adulthood? Adulthood, big word there. And is there a fear that it's going to affect their future relationships?
It does affect their future relationships, because again, they're a sponge, and they're taking in everything that mom is doing, they're taking in everything that dad's doing, and then in their brain, they're crunching all this information. They're making decisions that sometimes they don't even know they're making. That I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do that, or this person will never get that from me. Mm-hmm. They're making all these decisions, and when parents pit the kids against the other parent or use them, which we do not ever want to do because that puts kids in a really bad position, those kids are now struggling with loyalty issues and guilt issues, and they've got to live with one parent part of the time and live with the other parent the other part of the time. We don't want them having two different lives. We want them to have one life that goes back and forth between two homes. That's a very different scenario. That's
a huge distinction there, and a lot of co-parenting and adult behavior needed from the parents to be able to do that.
Yeah, and imagine when we're having issues. Let's just say the kids don't want to be involved in the middle. They just flat out don't want to be involved. They want to love both parents. They have two parents. They have things they like and don't like about their parents. We all do. Look at all the people who go through counseling, who go mm-hmm. through therapy. Most of that stuff, I won't say all of it, but a lot of that stuff is from childhood. It's old stuff. Sure. I meet with parents all the time working with their kids, and so many times we go back into the parents' childhood to shift some of the things that happened for them and what they're doing with it now, so that they can come out with their kids differently. It impacts them for years and years to come, unconsciously in so many ways. And the loss of respect for their parents, the loss of trust in their parents, and looking at, how am I going to parent my kids if I'm just being either pushed aside or yelled at because my parents are fighting. And the other thing to think of too is, especially with teenagers, when they're going through relationships, how do they go to their parents who are having relationship issues? They're fighting with their ex-spouse, and then maybe they're in another relationship and they're having fights or arguments or disagreements, and they haven't really learned how to communicate still. the kids are not going to be asking their parents for advice. They're going to go to their peers for advice. And their peers don't know what they need to be doing. So
still going to that person that has the same questions and
Exactly.
are trying to figure it out themselves.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
we talked a lot about the children see the fighting, or the parents think that they're keeping it from the kids. In preparation for this, I was actually talking to somebody, and they raised an issue that I hadn't thought of. But what about the parents who stay together for the sake of the kids? Then once they become empty nesters, they divorce. Do the kids know during that time, and how is it affecting them, the fact that parents really are just there being parents and it's not a family?
To go back to what I'd said before, some kids don't know because some parents really don't fight. They don't connect. So kids learn that that's how you are married. Very disconnected, but you don't fight. So they think that's how you are as a married couple. And that's what they start learning to create, which we don't want them creating that. Another thing to think about is if the kids do know, which most kids are going to know that there's issues, especially if they spend any time with their friends and their parents who do get along. They're going to see the difference and they're going to wonder about that. If they ask mom or dad the question and the parents say, oh no, everything's fine. The problem with that, and they're doing it for good reason, they want to protect their kids. They don't want them to worry about anything. But if they do that, and the kids have this gut feeling of something isn't right, what they're doing is they're leaving their kids with only two options. One is, my gut feeling is off. So they're not going to trust their gut because, well, my gut was wrong about this. What else could it be wrong about? The other thing is they'll if that's not the truth, then their parents are lying to them. So either I don't have a good instinct or my parents are liars.
So regardless, they're going to have trust issues because it's either
way.
they can't trust themselves or they can't trust somebody else.
Exactly.
Hey, Traci, what advice would you give parents going through a divorce or a custody case? How can they best care for their kids and ensure that these kids emerge from this major event in their lives healthy or emotionally healthy, and now that everything's going to be okay, splitting time between the two parents?
Boy, there are so many tips I could give that I go through in my classes. But if I boiled it down, do not argue with the other parent. If one of you, just one of you, is not able to have a conversation without being angry, take a break. Just take a break. It doesn't even matter if the kids are hearing or not hearing at that point. Just for the parents, they need to take that break.
But that's really what we see a lot. That's going to be a behavior that really has to change, because a lot of the times the issues, the fighting, is what may have led to the divorce, to the breakup. So they have to grow even more to get to that step.
That's a really good point, because when I do the co-parenting classes, I do tell the parents a lot of the things that broke them up are the things they are going to need to work through in order to do something better for their kids.
Great.
So either way, it's communication. That's why we focus at A Loving Way to Parent on communication and relationship building, because everybody needs that. Those two things. If we don't have relationships, life doesn't work. If we don't know how to communicate, life doesn't work. And one of the other suggestions I would make is a lot of parents are working with each other on Talking Parents, or they just text on their phones.
When you say Talking Parents, that's a program that's used by the courts for parents to communicate with each other.
Yes, so everything's documented. They'll use that against each other as opposed to using it as a tool to be clear.
We definitely see that quite often.
Definitely. And the other thing is, in communication, words is only 7%. When you're texting, you only get 7% of what you're communicating across to the other parent. And if you're mad at each other, you're making up the tone, the intention, the body language.
Oh, absolutely. You're
imagining all these things based on the relationship that didn't work. So I tell parents, you have to figure out a way to be able to talk. And another thing is that the kids need to be able to see you at the soccer games or the baseball games or the dance recital, piano, whatever it is. You've got to go to those things together. And I know some parents just figure, no, we don't get along. It's on their time, they go. It's on my time, I go. I mean, that's fine. They can do that. They can.
As both a family law attorney and former kids baseball coach, I've seen that a lot, and it's unfortunate for the kids.
It is unfortunate for the kids because they want mom and dad to see every highlight of their life.
Yes.
They don't want to split them up, and that's how you can have children living one life in two different homes. The parents live their own life in their different homes, but they need to be able to come to the birthday parties. They're going to be going to one wedding. They're going to have babies that are born. There's going to be events where these parents, we need to grow up. Adults need to grow up. Sometimes the kids feel like they have to go in and help the parents get along, but then it's the parent.
We shouldn't put the responsibility. Yeah, the kids shouldn't have that responsibility. I think one really big key thing there, I really like, I'm going to have to jot down, is one life, two different houses. They really need to have that continuity. So, Traci, somebody going through a divorce, custody case, just has a child, a teenager in need of help. What is the best way that they can get in touch with you?
Well, my website is at alovingway.com.
alovingway.com.
Correct.
Okay.
And then my email is Traci, Traci, at alovingway.com. And my phone number is 951-240-1407.
alovingway.com. I wasn't jotting all that down. Hopefully our listeners are jotting that down. Traci, I want to thank you for sharing this very important information with our listeners. Can you stick around for one more segment of the show?
Absolutely.
Great. Hey, when we return, Traci and I are going to go over the top 5 things not to do when you're involved in a custody battle. We'll be right back. Cool. Welcome back to 50 Scales of Gray. I'm your host, Attorney Michael Bender, co-founder of the Gray Legal Group, your Southern California family law attorneys, where we fight for businesses and owners. Your Southern California family law attorneys, where we fight for business owners and professionals to survive divorce with their money in their pockets and their kids by their side. Really quick, before we jump into this, we always get the question, and I'll go ahead and tackle it now. Gray, is there a Christian gray you're from? No, it's gray because the law is not black and white. But anyways, Traci, welcome back. I'm joined today by Traci Williams with A Loving Way to Parent. Traci, welcome back.
Thank you, Mike.
I appreciate all that good information that you just shared about parents and how they really need to focus on, well, one, themselves to make sure they're not damaging the children. And then really that key takeaway that we had at the end there was the kids, one life, two different homes. I think if there's anything that we take away from today, it's parents need to focus on that. So, hey, what I want to talk about now is I put together a little guide. 5 rules to follow to get the right custody schedule for your kids. These are things to avoid when going through a custody case, whether it's within a divorce or you have two parents that they're just going through a custody battle altogether. So, Traci, you've got that paper there in your hands. I'm going to let you start with number 1. All equal weight here. These are all very important. So go ahead and kick off with number 1.
Okay, number 1, don't be possessive and say my son or my daughter. And when I look at this, I know you have the legal piece of it. When I look at it from the emotional part of it and how a child feels and how important our words are. So when we talk about our children, that's a sharing context. And the kids feel part of both of us. When we say my child, there's a separation, even though maybe we're not talking about being separate, but we're putting that out there. And so just keeping that in mind.
My mind is blown right now because when I put together this list, obviously my focus is on the legal aspect of it. But really when you kind of take a peek into somebody's household, or maybe they're fighting, maybe they are arguing and the kids are there, parents will use these terms. Well, my son, my daughter, or if they're upset, you sometimes hear, well, your son, your daughter did this. From the legal aspect of it, now keep in mind this list was really put together as as soon as you file a custody case, you're under the microscope, and whether you put in words in your declaration, which is something that you file with the court to convince the judge or convince the mediator what you want, or you're in front of the judge, never ever say my son or my daughter. It's always ours. There are two parents to this child. Even had a judge, appeared in front of a judge one time, well, numerous times. Even had a judge at one of our local courts. He will stop and admonish parents and let them know that it's not just their son or their daughter, it's not their child, it's the parent's child. So he would always make sure that they used our. So. Okay, this is actually one of my favorite ones, number 2 here. Don't be an idiot on social media. Everybody's got to keep in mind that when they post on social media, even if you think your account is private, that information is going to get out there. So you never want to put the other parent down. You never want to make derogatory comments about the other parent on social media, because this is going to show if the other parent gets that information, they get their hands on this post that calls you a certain name that I won't use here, they can show that to the court and say, look how he or she thinks of me. This is what is going to be passed down to my child. Excuse me. Passed down to our child. I got to watch my words sometimes. But that's how they are going to try and make the impression of the other parent. So we always want to make sure that, as well, hopefully it's just good rule of thumb, you're not being an idiot on social media regardless, but really you got to be careful once a case is filed.
Absolutely. And what comes to my mind when I think about this one is embarrassment. The kids, they're not all on the same social media platforms that their parents are on.
I get reminded of that all the time from my kids.
Their friends' parents are, though.
Absolutely.
And so those things come back on them. And maybe somebody doesn't want their kids to hang out with you because of the fighting that's happening between your parents. It has nothing to do with you, but you never know how that's going to impact your kids. And it really does turn out to be very embarrassing. Wow, my parents are on social media just, dragging each other through the mud. And really think about, if I'm a child, I am part mom and part my dad. I'm part of both of these people. And so if they're slamming each other, how does that make me feel about myself? So we really have to be careful. And again, our words. If we want to make a better relationship with the other parent, our part, we were talking about how to look at our part of it, and that is really look at how am I speaking of the other parent, if I am speaking of the other parent. And they say, if you're not going to say anything nice, don't say anything at all. That this would be a moment that would apply. Definitely.
It's not just on social media, but in any social context.
Yes. And we need to vent, we need to talk. So find a person that you can do that with, but you don't need to do that with the world, because your children live in that world, and it will show up.
Absolutely. You want to go ahead and read number 3 here?
Yes. Don't keep the child from the other parent. And again, that makes me think of loyalty, and that makes me think of guilt, and it makes me think of the kids being put in position of picking. Or, if they're going along with one parent, they're against the other parent. If they're going along with the other parent, now they're suddenly against this parent. And then they're uncomfortable when they go from one house to the other because, oh no, now my other parent's going to be mad at me. So they're just trying to avoid being upset with having one parent be upset with them, but they're living again in these 2 houses that are at war, but they have to be okay with each parent in each of those 2 houses. You can see how that would be very detrimental to them if we're having all of these fights over where the kids can be and can't be and when they can and all of that. So.
Absolutely. And from my perspective here, as I mentioned in the first segment, really the best advice that we give our clients is don't be stupid. And keeping a child from the other parent, whether you have court orders or not. I talked about it earlier when there weren't any court orders. But this goes, when you do have court orders, when you don't have court orders, both parents are entitled to that relationship with a child, and that needs to be fostered, needs to be grown. You can't sit there and think, well, I'm the better parent, therefore I get to dictate the schedule. And if you don't agree with what I'm saying, it's really you're going to be looked negatively by the court, because ultimately you're going to be in that conflict. You're going to have to go in front of a judge and explain yourself. Why are you keeping this child from the other parent?
And the other thought I have on that is, if I think I'm doing the better job, That's great. So I need to just keep doing that better job. The other parent probably thinks they're doing a pretty good job as well. Encourage them to keep doing a great job. Just because you're different doesn't mean somebody is right or wrong. And the kids need impact and influence from both of the parents. They need to have the good, the bad, and the ugly from both parents. That's who they are. They need to understand where each parent has failed and what they learned from it, so they can learn from that. If we keep each other, or if we think that we're the ones that have all the answers and the other parent doesn't have anything, we're keeping that child from half of who they are and the influence that they could have in their life. And we don't, the kids want to know both of their parents. There's stories and history and generations of information that can be passed on. You want them to have a great relationship with both of them.
Absolutely. Number 4, we can just touch on this because we actually talked about it with social media, but it's really don't say stupid things about the other parent, or even allow a new significant other, new boyfriend, new girlfriend, friends to say anything about it, because like you mentioned, really I'm looking at this from the child's aspect right now. What embarrassment is that going to cause? What is it going to cause them to think about the other parent? And then again, even going down to the loyalty. Well, if mom or dad thinks this way, or if this outside world, this third person is looking at this way, is my parent really what they say they are?
Yeah, and also thinking about if you go to, say, one parent's house and the other parent has been bad-mouthing them, chances are that parent's going to be in a bad mood. So now the child is going back and forth between parents who are in bad moods.
And they're that one life that we talk about is really going to be viewed in a negative light here.
Yeah.
So number 5.
All right, number 5 is don't be argumentative. And again, I come back to the place of we are teaching our kids how to communicate. We are teaching them how to be in a relationship. We are not going to like everything and everybody that we ever come across in our lives. And so we need to teach our children how to deal with people and situations that are not up to our standard or the way that we want them.
I really think looking at there as far as don't be argumentative, people think, hey, we're going into a custody case, we're going into divorce. Oh, I see this on TV, everybody's fighting all the time. Well, it doesn't have to be like that. While the marriage didn't work out, while the relationship didn't work out, they still need to be there for their kids and set a good example. So, Traci, I want to thank you again for joining me today. Remind us again how a parent with kids, teenagers who are struggling, how they can get in touch with you.
My website is alovingway.com. Email Traci@alovingway.com. And my phone number is 951-240-1407. Fantastic.
So if anybody wants to reach out to Traci, we'll cut that part. I want to thank everybody out there who tuned in today. Remember, you can join us here every Saturday morning on KATY FM 101.3. For more information about what we've discussed or to contact the Gray Legal Group, go to 50scalesofgray.com. That's Gray with an E, 50scalesofgray.com. Remember, the Gray Legal Group, because the law is not black and white. Have a great day.